She thought she had closed that door forever. But 3 weeks after the divorce, Meghan found out she was pregnant, and now the millionaire wants her back. Alone, standing in front of a pregnancy test, in the same bathroom where so many tears had been silently shed, Meghan feels the floor slip away once again. What should have been a new beginning turns into a whirlwind of memories, open wounds, and a name she tried to forget. But sometimes destiny has plans that even the most broken heart can't escape. And what happened next, you won't believe. If this story touched you, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments. Where are you listening to this message from? Your support keeps this channel alive and inspires us to keep telling stories that speak straight to the heart. The silence in Meghan Carter's penthouse was the kind that rang in the ears, the kind that made the ticking of the clock sound like thunder. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with life, yellow taxis honking, sirens echoing in the distance, voices rising and falling in the never-ending hum of the city. But inside, everything had stilled. Her world had narrowed to a single white stick resting on the marble bathroom counter, 2 pink lines. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her face remained composed. A mask she had perfected over years of boardrooms, interviews, and high-stakes investor meetings. But now, alone in her designer silk robe, with her name embroidered over her heart, she wasn't the poised CEO of a successful wellness empire. She was just Meghan, a woman whose marriage had ended 23 days ago. A woman who had spent countless nights staring at this very mirror, wondering if the life she built with Brandon Ellis had ever truly belonged to her. And now this. A heartbeat inside her, a future she had once longed for with everything in her. Showing up too late. Meghan leaned against the sink, gripping the cold marble edge. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp cheekbones, dark circles she hadn't bothered to conceal, and eyes, usually steel clear, now brimming with something she couldn't name. Not quite grief, not yet hope. Of course, she whispered to herself, a bitter laugh catching in her throat. Of course now. She remembered the countless conversations they'd had about children. Brandon wanted to wait. He said they needed time, that their careers were still on fire. She had agreed, outwardly. But in secret, she had tracked her cycles, imagined nursery colors, wondered what their child would inherit, her empathy, his mind, their ambition. And now here it was, life, uninvited and miraculous, blooming after their love had withered. She walked slowly to the kitchen, the test still in hand, like proof the universe was playing games with her. The espresso machine blinked in standby, but she didn't need caffeine. Her stomach churned with something far more potent, fear. Not of the baby, but of everything it meant. Brandon. His name echoed like a shadow in the room. Would he want to know? Would he fight for her now, after letting her go so easily? She sat on the velvet stool by the marble island and closed her eyes. She could still see the divorce papers, crisp and sterile. She had signed them with a hand that didn't tremble, not in front of him. She hadn't shed a tear, not until the elevator doors closed, and she realized that she had not just lost a husband, she had lost the man who once made her feel like she could do anything. They had met at Stanford, 2 sparks in the middle of a storm. He had been magnetic, brilliant, just slightly arrogant. She had been guarded, fierce, determined not to fall, but fall she did, fast, hard, completely. And then, just as quickly, everything cracked. The betrayal had come like lightning, sharp, sudden, devastating. A single image of Brandon and Claire Monroe in his office, hands too close, a laugh too intimate. It was all it took. She hadn't waited for explanations. She had packed, signed, and walked away. Now, with a child growing inside her, Meghan realized something painful. She didn't know if she had walked away too fast or not fast enough. The intercom buzzed. A delivery. She ignored it. Her phone lit up with a message from Rachel, her best friend. Want to do brunch tomorrow? You sound off. Off? That didn't begin to cover it. She typed back, can't, not feeling great. Let's talk soon. Not yet. She wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not to Rachel, not to her doctor, not to herself, not even to the child growing inside her. She reached for her planner out of habit, her sacred tool for control. Everything was color-coded, planned to the hour. Meetings, product launches, yoga, therapy. She flipped through the week. Nowhere had she written, "Unexpected pregnancy. Alone. Terrified." A thought tugged at her. Would Brandon find out? And if he did, what would he do? She shook her head. No, she wouldn't go there. Not now. But another voice, softer, deeper, and undeniably hers, whispered beneath the fear, "You still love him." No, she couldn't afford that. Not anymore. This baby had to be about her. Megan stood and walked back to the bathroom, the sun beginning to break through the tall windows. The city was glowing gold. Life was moving forward, and now so was she. She touched her stomach gently, her hand trembling just a little less. "You and me now," she whispered. "We'll figure it out." But in a penthouse across the country, someone else had just seen the same news she was trying to hide. There are moments so vivid they become etched into the skin, like scars that no one else can see, but you feel every time you breathe. For Megan Carter, it was the sound of laughter. High-pitched, too sweet, and coming from behind a closed door. She had walked into Brandon's office that day with 2 cups of coffee, his with oat milk and 2 shots of espresso, hers with cinnamon and almond milk. A gesture born of routine, comfort, the quiet intimacy of a couple who knew each other's chaos and rhythms. She had done it 100 times before, but this time the door was half shut, and Claire Monroe's voice was unmistakable, flirty, soft, almost purring. Something in Megan's chest tightened, a premonition she didn't want to admit. She told herself not to overthink it. Claire was his vice president of marketing, ambitious, sharp, beautiful in that effortless, too perfect way, but professional, always professional. Still, Megan pushed the door open, and there they were. Claire perched on the edge of Brandon's desk, too close, one hand resting lightly on his forearm, her dress just a little too high on the thigh, her head tilted as if she were confiding a secret. Brandon leaned in, not touching her, not quite, but not pulling away either. He looked up, his eyes widened. "Megan," he began. But she had already turned around. The coffees spilled in the hallway. The elevator doors were closing. Her heart was racing so hard she could barely hear herself breathe. People passed by, curious glances flicking toward the CEO of Carter & Co., walking out with eyes full of fire and hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. That image never left her. Even now, weeks later, Megan couldn't walk into a boardroom without remembering the way Claire had smiled, like she had won. And maybe, in a way, she had. Because what Claire destroyed that day was not just a marriage, it was trust. It was the foundation of everything Megan had built with Brandon, from the college nights they shared ramen to the billion-dollar empire he had crafted with her by his side. She hadn't waited for an explanation. She had packed her things the same night, moved into the guest suite at the Gramercy Hotel, and called her lawyer by morning. No tears, no begging, no dramatic confrontation. Just silence. It was how she had survived everything in life. Quietly, gracefully, like a ballerina bleeding inside satin slippers. And now, 3 weeks post-divorce, she was still bleeding. Only this time, she was carrying a life inside her. She sat at her desk, the soft grey cashmere blanket over her shoulders, and stared at the blank document on her laptop. A pitch for a new wellness retreat. She couldn't write a word. Instead, her eyes drifted to the framed photo still on the corner of her desk, a rare candid of her and Brandon from 2 years ago. They were laughing, standing barefoot on the cliffs of Big Sur, wind tangled in their hair, champagne in hand. She hadn't had the heart to remove it. Not yet. Megan reached for it, studied his face. He had always been handsome, chiseled jaw, storm grey eyes, that confident smirk that somehow managed to be arrogant and boyish at once. But what she remembered most was his intensity, the way he saw her, truly saw her, even when she tried to hide. And that's what hurt the most, that he hadn't fought for her, not when she slammed the door, not when the rumors started, not even when the divorce papers arrived at his penthouse. He had just let her go, like she wasn't worth the truth. A knock pulled her back to the present. Rachel peeked in, holding 2 smoothies. "Strawberry ginger for the lady of the hour," she said with a soft smile. "You okay?" Megan forced a nod. "Just tired." Rachel hesitated, then stepped inside, lowering her voice. "You haven't told him yet?" Megan stiffened. "No. Do you plan to?" "I don't know." Rachel sat across from her, the smoothie untouched. "Megs, you're not the same since that day. You've built an empire, led women to find their voice and healing, but you've never healed from him." Megan didn't respond, because Rachel was right, and it scared her. That one moment, one image of Brandon and Claire had unraveled everything she believed about love, loyalty, and herself. And now, with a baby growing quietly inside her, that moment was whispering again. What if she had been wrong? What if there was more to the story? What if she had never truly let go? She closed her laptop and stood, walking to the window. The city glittered beneath her, endless and alive. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably giving a TED talk or signing another deal, charming the world like nothing had ever touched him, like she had never existed. But deep down, something told her that wasn't true. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it. And what she didn't know yet was that Brandon had just seen her photo leaving the obstetrician's office, and everything was about to change. The screen of Brandon Ellis's phone lit up in the middle of a crowded conference room at his San Francisco headquarters. He usually ignored notifications during investor meetings, but something about this alert caught the corner of his eye. The headline glared back at him from a media alert. "Exclusive: Megan Carter spotted leaving obstetrician's office in Manhattan." His fingers froze over the edge of the glass water bottle. His first reaction was disbelief. His second was breathless silence. He stared at the screen, reading the words again, slower this time, as if repetition would change their meaning. But it didn't. Megan. Obstetrician. Pregnancy. Brandon blinked, his jaw tight. He hadn't seen her in person since she left him standing alone in their apartment, the same night she had walked out of his life without a word of explanation beyond her attorney's email. But now she was pregnant, and not just any woman. His Megan. A sharp pang hit his chest before he could name it. Could it be his? It had to be. It had only been 3 weeks since the divorce, but he knew every moment of their final months together, every touch. Every night she had slept with her head on his chest, even when her heart was already slipping away. He stood up so abruptly that the entire room fell silent. "Mr. Ellis?" the lead investor asked, confused. "We still haven't gone over the China expansion." Brandon's voice came out lower than usual. "Postpone the meeting. Something urgent just came up." The murmurs began before he reached the hallway. But he didn't care. He stormed into his office, pulled his phone to his ear and barked to his assistant, "Get me a private flight to New York, now, tonight." "But sir, there's a major thunderstorm across the East Coast. Flights are being grounded." "I said now." The next hours moved in a haze. As the storm built over the skyline like a warning from the universe, Brandon packed a single bag with instinctive efficiency. No suits, no tech gear. Just jeans, a sweater, and the leather jacket Megan had once stolen from his closet during their first fall together. He hadn't worn it since she left. Now he couldn't explain why it felt necessary. The private hangar was nearly deserted when he arrived. Lightning danced along the clouds like angry veins, and the wind screamed across the tarmac. The pilot hesitated. "This isn't exactly ideal weather to fly into." Brandon's voice was calm, but firm. "I need to be in Manhattan tonight. I don't care how bumpy it gets." The jet lifted off into the storm as if echoing the turmoil inside him. In the dim cabin light, Brandon sat motionless, fists clenched. Images of Megan flickered through his mind, her laugh in the morning light, the way she used to talk to her plants like they were old friends, her fury the night she left. He never got to explain. He never told her the truth. About Claire. About that day. About the betrayal she thought she saw. He had let her go because pride had swallowed his voice, and shame had kept it buried. But now the possibility of a child changed everything. Not just because of responsibility, but because of love. He still loved her. had never stopped. Hours later, the jet touched down at Teterboro Airport in the dead of night. Rain slammed against the runway like applause from a cruel audience. Brandon barely waited for the stairs to lower before leaping into the downpour, his shoes soaked within seconds. The driver was already waiting. "Straight to her place," Brandon ordered, climbing into the back seat. "Upper East Side." The driver hesitated. "Sir, it's late." "I don't care." As they sped through the wet streets of Manhattan, Brandon's mind raced with questions. Would she open the door? Would she scream, cry? Would she deny the pregnancy? Confirm it? Would she even let him speak? He had no answers, only a heartbeat that echoed louder with every block. The city blurred past, soaked neon signs, traffic lights blinking like Morse code. He didn't notice any of it. He only saw her, the way she used to dance barefoot in their living room, the way she had trusted him before everything shattered. And then suddenly the car stopped, her building. The doorman recognized him but said nothing. Brandon didn't wait for the elevator. He ran up the stairs 3 flights at a time until he stood outside her apartment, heart pounding like war drums in his chest. He knocked, once, twice. No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Megan, it's me." Silence. He pressed his forehead to the door. "I know it's late," he said, voice hoarse. "But I saw the news, and I need to know. I need to talk to you. Please." Still nothing. Then a sound. Soft footsteps. A hesitant shuffle. The door cracked open just slightly. And there she was, wrapped in a robe, hair down, face pale but unmistakably beautiful. Her eyes held no mascara, no gloss, only raw, stunned recognition. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. He simply looked at her, and then at her stomach. And suddenly, everything else fell away. The first thing Megan noticed was the rain, not outside, but on him. Brandon stood in the doorway, drenched to the bone, his clothes clinging to him like regret. His chest rose and fell, every breath thick with something unspoken. The storm behind him howled through the corridor, but the silence between them was louder. Megan didn't move. She had opened the door half in disbelief, half in instinct. And now, face to face with the man who had broken her, she didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Brandon's eyes scanned her face, landing briefly on her stomach, then back to her eyes. "You're really pregnant," he whispered. Megan crossed her arms, the robe tightening around her. "Sharp observation, Ellis. No wonder they call you a genius." He flinched. Not at the sarcasm, he was used to that, but at the way she said his last name. Distant, foreign, like he was a stranger wearing a version of her past. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Not out of kindness, but because she needed answers more than she needed distance. The door clicked shut behind him. Water pooled beneath his shoes, and his hair dripped onto the floor like tears refusing to be hidden. He didn't wipe his face, didn't speak. He simply looked around the apartment as if taking inventory of the life she had built without him. "Still obsessed with lavender candles," he muttered, eyes landing on one flickering near the couch. "I light them to keep the demons out," she replied. "Clearly it's not working tonight." Brandon chuckled softly, despite himself. "You always had a sharp tongue, and you always had a way of making me need it." They stood in silence, separated by more than just a coffee table. She finally broke it. "What do you want, Brandon?" "To explain. Why now?" Her voice cracked. "You let me leave. You didn't fight. You didn't even ask me to stay." He stepped closer. "Because I thought I didn't deserve to." Her jaw tightened. "That's convenient." He ran a hand through his soaked hair, his eyes pleading. "Can I just tell you what happened that day, please?" Megan exhaled and walked to the window, back to him, as the city sparkled through rain-smeared glass. "Speak," she said coldly. "You have 5 minutes." Brandon nodded, almost thankful for the rules. "I didn't cheat on you, Megan." She didn't turn around. "I swear to you. That day with Claire, I was confronting her about a series of inappropriate messages she had been sending me. I'd been ignoring them, hoping she'd stop, but she didn't. I told her it was over, that she needed to respect my marriage and my boundaries. She didn't take it well. Megan turned slightly, not enough to face him, but enough to listen. She touched my arm, laughed, said I was just scared of how I really felt. I stood up to leave, and that's when you walked in. It looked bad, I know, but it was never what you thought it was. And you didn't think to tell me. Her voice rose, shaky. You didn't chase me. You let me believe. I was ashamed, he cut in. Not of what happened, but of how easily you believed it, of how little faith you had in me. And a part of me thought maybe I deserved to lose you. Megan finally turned, eyes filled with fire and tears. You did. Brandon's face crumpled. I know. I trusted you with everything, she said, walking closer. My company, my heart, my future, and all it took was one moment to erase it all. I've regretted that moment every day since, he said softly. Megan's voice broke. You destroyed me. No, Megan, he whispered. I destroyed us, and I'm sorry. Something cracked in her then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a fracture in the armor. A part of her that had been frozen for weeks now trembled under the weight of his voice. She sat down on the arm of the sofa, arms wrapped around herself. Why now? Why rush here in the middle of a storm? He kneeled before her, rain still dripping from his jacket. Because I saw the photo, and I knew. I knew it was mine. And even if you hate me, even if you never want to see me again, I want to be part of this child's life. I want to be there every step. Megan looked away. Her voice was barely a whisper. It's not that easy. I know, he said. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for a chance. She met his eyes, full of pain, longing, guilt, and something dangerously close to hope. I can't trust you, not yet. Brandon nodded. Then I'll earn it. A beat passed, then another, and without thinking, Megan reached for a towel, tossed it at him. You're dripping on my rug. He caught it midair, smiled softly. Still bossy. Still yours, she almost said. But the words caught in her throat and dissolved in silence. Outside, the rain began to quiet. Inside, something had shifted. Not healed, not mended, but softened. A beginning. Or maybe just the end of an ending. The smell of roasted hazelnut and cinnamon filled the corner cafe like a warm memory. Megan stirred her tea slowly, her eyes locked on the book in front of her, but her mind far from the pages. The world moved around her, baristas calling orders, the hum of soft jazz, couples sharing pastries. But she was elsewhere, suspended in that strange limbo between wariness and familiarity. And then she saw him. Again. Brandon walked through the door like he belonged to the city, coat open, hair tousled by the November breeze, and holding a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting under one arm. He caught her eye from across the room, offered a cautious, almost shy smile. Megan sighed and looked back at her tea. You're not stalking me, are you? He sat across from her, uninvited but welcome in a way she didn't want to admit. It's a public place, and it's the third time I've been here this week. You always order the lavender scone. She arched an eyebrow. You're keeping track of my bakery habits now? He held up a takeout bag. No, I'm trying to earn points. Her eyes narrowed. Points. Rebuilding trust. I figured I'd start with carbs. She tried not to smile. She failed. Over the next few days, Brandon continued to appear. Not in grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but in quiet, persistent ways. He started showing up at her OB appointments, sitting in the corner, notebook in hand, asking the doctor thoughtful questions about the baby's growth, prenatal nutrition, birthing plans. He never overstepped, never assumed. He just showed up. Megan watched him from the examination table, surprised by the way he listened, truly listened. She had known the version of Brandon who could dominate a tech summit stage with his intelligence. But this was different. He scribbled notes like a student, asked about vitamin B6, carried her bag when she looked tired. One afternoon, he dropped off a stack of pregnancy books at her door, each bookmarked with sticky notes and highlighted passages. Chapter 5, he said, pointing to a tab. Apparently, the baby can start to hear your voice around this time. She nodded, clutching the book longer than necessary after he left. He also began texting her, Not constantly, not intrusively. Just enough. Brandon. Morning sickness still winning today? Megan. Round 3 with toast. I'm losing. Brandon. I read ginger helps. Also, I made a smoothie. Want one? He became a fixture in the in-between spaces of her life. At the pharmacy when she picked up prenatal vitamins. At the farmer's market, where he handed her organic pears and made awkward jokes about cravings. At the small bookstore near her building, where he somehow knew she liked the corner by the fireplace. There were still walls, of course. Megan made sure of that. She didn't invite him in when he walked her home. She didn't ask him about his life in California. She didn't let him touch her beyond a gentle hand on her back once, when she tripped on a curb and pretended not to notice how steadying his touch still felt. But something was thawing. One evening, they sat together at the park near her apartment. Megan had just finished a short walk, feeling winded but peaceful. Brandon held a thermos of her favorite herbal tea. You always carry tea now? She asked. I carry whatever I think you might need, he replied simply. She stared at the playground across the lawn. Do you ever think about how different things could have been if that day had gone differently? Brandon didn't answer immediately. His voice was low when he finally spoke. I think about it every day. They sat in silence, the kind that felt more like presence than absence. Megan watched a young couple pass with a stroller. The mother laughed while the father made silly faces. She felt something twist inside her. Fear, maybe, or longing, or both. I don't know if I can do this with you, she admitted, voice barely audible. He turned to her gently. You don't have to decide that now. I'm not asking for forever, just today. She didn't reply, but she didn't get up either. Later that night, she found a message on her phone. A voice note. Brandon's voice, warm, steady, speaking softly. Hey, little one. I don't know if you can hear me yet, but I'm your dad, and I just want you to know. I'm going to do better. For your mom. For you. For who I want to become. Sleep well in there. She replayed it 3 times, and cried on the 4th. The next morning, when he showed up with tea and a muffin, she didn't question it. She didn't say much, but she left the door open an extra second after taking the bag. He noticed. Rachel Monroe didn't believe in second chances, especially when the man in question had broken the heart of the woman she considered a sister. Since the divorce, she had stood by Megan with fierce loyalty. And now, seeing Brandon walk around as if he could simply rebuild what had been shattered, she felt a quiet urgency to protect her, even from herself. So Rachel did what she did best. She made a plan. She called Brandon with an impeccable excuse, a proposal for consulting on a new luxury skincare line, the perfect pretext for a professional meeting between the two. Her voice on the phone was polished, charming, cordial to the point of being over the top. He agreed without hesitation. On the scheduled afternoon, Rachel arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes late on purpose. She looked impeccable, her hair elegantly tied up, high heels, a dress just tight enough to be both professional and enticing. As she approached the table, Brandon was already there. White shirt rolled up at the sleeves, dark grey blazer, attentive but neutral expression. She extended her hand. He shook it, firm, respectful. Rachel, he said with a smile. Always stylish. Brandon. Always punctual, she replied, sitting down. The waiter brought sparkling water with lemon, and Rachel began the game. I've been thinking about expanding Megan's brand into something more sophisticated, a new audience, something that speaks of desire, exclusivity, intimacy. Brandon nodded professionally. Sounds interesting. Do you have numbers, target audience, any early metrics? She slid a tablet across the table, containing fake but plausible data. While he reviewed it, she leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice. But what I really want to understand is if you still have interest in the behind the scenes of this world, or if you're just playing at redemption. Brandon looked up, calmly. Sorry? Rachel placed her elbows on the table, smiling mysteriously. You know Megan. Impulsive, soft heart. But I'm not. I see things clearly. And what I'm seeing, Brandon, is someone trying to reclaim what they let fall. You're right, he replied without hesitation. "I let it fall and I'm trying to fix it with respect, with patience." She tilted her head. "And if I told you there might be other opportunities, more strategic alliances, more intense ones?" The provocation was subtle. A longer glance, a touch that never quite reached him, an insinuation wrapped in a business proposal. Brandon gently closed the tablet and leaned back in his chair. His eyes, for the first time that evening, were no longer diplomatic. "Rachel," he said calmly, "you're testing me." She smiled. "Am I?" "Yes. And that's okay. I probably deserve it." She didn't respond. She had expected discomfort, arrogance, but what she saw was something else. Clarity. "You want to know if I'm still the man who let Megan leave without fighting? Or worse, if I'm the kind who cheats behind her back?" He sighed. "And the truth is, I was weak. I was proud. But I was never unfaithful, and I will never be a coward again." Rachel leaned back, surprised by his serenity. "That reaction of yours," she said after a moment, "is the first thing that gives me some hope since all this started." Brandon smiled. "I'm glad, because I'm not here to convince anyone with words. I'm here to stay, the right way." She watched him carefully. The Brandon Ellis she had known years ago would have used the situation to manipulate, control, turn the tables in his favor. The man before her didn't fall into traps. He didn't retreat. But he didn't attack either. He just stood firm in who he was trying to be. Rachel grabbed her purse and stood up. "Consider yourself approved, Ellis, but know this, if you hurt her again." She leaned in and whispered, "You'll deal with me, and I'm not as kind as I seem." Brandon laughed. "Fair enough." She walked away with firm steps and an unreadable expression. Later that night, Megan received a message on her phone. "Rachel, he passed." Megan, "Passed what?" Rachel, "The test." Megan stared at the screen for a long time. Across the city, Brandon walked the streets of Manhattan alone, unaware that at that very moment, Megan was holding her phone as if it were the first real proof that maybe, just maybe, he was actually changing. The trust didn't return like thunder. It arrived like mist, slow, quiet, unnoticed at first, until the whole air changed. Brandon began showing up early to every appointment. He no longer waited to be invited. He simply was there, sitting patiently in the waiting room, reading articles on prenatal care, sometimes holding 2 cups of tea, 1 ginger, 1 peppermint, depending on her nausea that day. At first, Megan said little. She would offer a polite nod, brief conversation, and then retreat into her phone. But something shifted the day he brought her a pair of compression socks. "I read they help with circulation," he said, awkwardly handing her the box. She stared at him, then laughed, truly laughed, the first time in weeks. "You're reading way too many mommy blogs," he smiled. "You'd be surprised how many Reddit threads are full of desperate dads." That night, he sent her a playlist titled "Midnight with Baby Carter Ellis." Megan listened to it on repeat. One morning, she woke up groggy and irritated, her back aching from lack of sleep. She shuffled into the kitchen, expecting silence and maybe leftover tea. Instead, Brandon stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, blending a smoothie. "You don't live here," she muttered. "I know," he said, not turning, "but you texted at 2 a.m. complaining about heartburn." "I didn't ask you to come." "You didn't have to." He poured the smoothie into a tall glass and handed it to her. "No almond milk," I remembered. She took it without a word, sipped, then sat down and watched him like he was something unfamiliar, a man she had once loved, now moving inside her world like he belonged again. The days passed. He learned her new schedule, vitamin reminders, evening walks, weird cravings for frozen grapes at midnight. He brought pillows that adjusted to her swelling back. He downloaded meditation apps she didn't know existed. He learned to rub her feet without her asking, and more impressively, without trying to make it mean something else. It was all gentle, quiet. No declarations, no apologies repeated, just presence. One evening, they sat on the couch watching an old documentary about architecture, something Megan used to love but hadn't touched since the breakup. Brandon brought her a hot towel for her feet. She thanked him. He didn't reply. He just sat beside her and watched in silence, letting her head rest on his shoulder when sleepiness crept in. The next morning she found a folded note near her tea mug. Appointment at 3 p.m. Don't forget your water bottle. I added lemon. B. She stared at the note longer than she should have. That evening, over takeout and chamomile tea, Megan cleared her throat. You know, she began, stabbing a piece of grilled tofu. This isn't exactly sustainable. Brandon looked up, confused. The tofu? No, she said, half smiling. You, running back and forth between coasts, showing up here like a part-time roommate with a smoothie addiction. He chuckled. I can cut back on the smoothies. I'm serious. He set down his chopsticks. Okay. She didn't lift her eyes. I have an extra bedroom. It's already kind of yours anyway. Might be easier if you just stayed. Brandon blinked. Here. With you? No. With the dog I don't have. Her tone was dry, but her hand trembled slightly. He searched her face. Are you sure? I didn't say forever. Just until the baby comes. It makes sense, practical sense. He nodded slowly. Then, yeah, I'd like that. They didn't toast or hug or turn it into a moment. They just kept eating. But later that night, when Megan passed him in the hallway, her fingers brushed his for the briefest second. She didn't pull away. In the days that followed, their routines merged with a strange, delicate rhythm. She worked in the mornings from the sunroom. He took meetings with his team from her office, wearing headphones and speaking in hushed tones so he wouldn't disturb her naps. They crossed paths in the kitchen like roommates, one pouring granola, the other heating herbal tea. Once, she found him quietly assembling a crib she hadn't ordered yet. You're doing this backwards, she said, leaning on the doorway. He grinned. That's the only way I know how. Some nights they ate dinner on the balcony in silence, sharing a blanket as the fall air began to bite. Other nights they watched old movies, her head resting on a pillow he positioned behind her neck, just right. There were still walls, but the doors were open now. And trust, like mist, had begun to settle. The boardroom was packed, 40 people, 12 countries represented on the call, 3 media outlets waiting outside. Megan Carter stood at the front of the glass-paneled room, heels grounded, voice steady, her belly gently curved beneath a tailored black dress. She was a force. Even now, 7 months pregnant, she held the attention of every executive in the room. Her presentation slides advanced smoothly behind her, each one representing months of work, millions in potential revenue, and the strategic rebirth of her wellness empire. And with this expansion, she said, gesturing to the graph, Carter & Co. will redefine not just self-care but self-worth. Applause broke out. Megan took a breath. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. That's when everything spun. It started with a flicker of light in her peripheral vision. Then came the wave of nausea, sudden and cold. Her vision blurred. The room dipped. Someone called her name. Then again. And then, nothing. Darkness. She came to in the back of an ambulance, oxygen mask pressed to her face, lights spinning above her like ghosts. Where? She rasped, struggling to sit up. A gloved hand gently stopped her. You fainted, ma'am, just relax. You're okay. Baby's okay. We're taking you to Mount Sinai. Call, she whispered, her throat dry, her fingers searching blindly. Call Brandon. He arrived before the doctor finished saying preeclampsia. Storming into the hospital room with eyes wide and chest heaving, Brandon looked like a man who'd just run through fire. Megan. She was sitting up now, pale, IV in her arm. She blinked at him. You came. You scared the hell out of me. She tried to smile, but her lips were cracked. Don't be dramatic. He stepped closer, took her hand, gently, reverently, like it was made of glass. What happened? She shook her head. Dizzy, then gone. The doctor cleared his throat. Her blood pressure spiked. We're monitoring closely. Preeclampsia can be dangerous for both mother and child. The words hung in the air like a cold wind. Dangerous. Megan looked away. Brandon didn't. How long does she need to stay? He asked. At least a few nights. We need to stabilize her. She needs rest. Brandon nodded once. She won't be alone. The doctor left. Megan tried to protest. You don't have to. But he was already pulling off his jacket, already moving a chair beside the bed, already calling his assistant to cancel everything on his calendar for the next week. No meetings, no flights, no calls, he said into the phone. Nothing matters more than this. Megan stared at him. This wasn't the Brandon she remembered. Distracted, unavailable, always somewhere else. This man was still, focused. There, he turned to her. You're stuck with me. That night, he sat by her bed reading aloud from a book on pregnancy complications, not because she needed to know, but because he did. When she dozed off, he dimmed the lights and moved into the adjacent hospital room, requested by him, arranged within minutes. He returned every hour to check her. Once, around 3 a.m., she woke to find him asleep at her side, his hand still wrapped around hers, his head resting on the edge of the mattress. She didn't move, just watched him. And something in her heart cracked open in a way she didn't expect. The next morning, he arrived with a portable speaker. Hospital vibes are depressing, he said. You need your yoga playlist. She chuckled. I'm not exactly in warrior pose right now. You're always in warrior pose. He unpacked her favorite robe, a pair of warm socks, a silk eye mask, all from her apartment, all things she hadn't even thought to ask for. You remembered my socks, she whispered, touched. I remember everything. Brandon didn't just stay. He transformed. He became her calendar, her advocate, her peace. He knew when to speak and when to be quiet. He fed her ice chips when her lips cracked, read articles aloud when her mind needed distraction, adjusted her pillows without being asked, argued with nurses over medication dosages when she didn't have the strength. He didn't flinch, he didn't leave, and most of all, he didn't try to fix things with words, only with actions. On the third night, Megan cried, not from pain, not from fear, from relief. He held her careful and firm, and didn't say a word until her breathing evened out. You're not alone, he whispered. Not now, not again. By the 5th day, her blood pressure stabilized. She was allowed to go home. But something had shifted, not just in her body, but in her understanding of who he was becoming. Back at the apartment, he helped her settle into the bedroom. He brought her water, tucked in the blanket, sat on the edge of the bed as she closed her eyes. Before she drifted off, she murmured, You were never like this before. I know. So what changed? Brandon looked at her, really looked, and said, I finally understood what losing you actually meant. The rain tapped gently against the windows, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby Megan hadn't known she needed. The apartment was dim, silent except for the sound of Brandon's steps in the kitchen, preparing chamomile tea with honey. The 3rd of the night. She was alone in the bedroom, finally recovering from the preeclampsia scare. Still tired, still with a heavy body, but alive, and her heart strange. It didn't hurt like before. Now it felt more curious, more awake. As she settled between the pillows, searching for a light distraction, her eyes landed on the old wooden box in the corner of the closet. The box where she kept old letters, notebooks, travel postcards, things that carried who she had been before the fall. Compelled by something she couldn't name, she pulled the box closer, opened it slowly. Photos, letters, drafts, receipts of a life shared, and then something new. A thick envelope folded in half with her handwriting on the back. For Megan, never delivered. She frowned. The paper was already yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded. But it was his. Brandon. She hesitated for a second, then opened it. Megan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to hand it to you. Which sounds about right. You walked out today. I heard the click of the door. I haven't moved since. It's dark now. The apartment's quiet. The plants you love are still near the window, like they're waiting for you to come back. I should have run after you. I should have grabbed your hand and told you the truth. Not just about Claire, but about everything I was too scared to say. But shame is louder than love sometimes, and I've always been better at hiding than at feeling. You think I didn't care. God, Megan, you were everything. Still are. I let you leave because I thought maybe Maybe you'd be better without me. Maybe I was the storm in your sky, and you deserve sunlight. But if by some miracle this finds you one day, I hope you know this. It was never lack of love, only lack of courage. And if there's ever a way back to you, I'd take it, no matter how far I have to crawl. Always, B. Megan didn't breathe for long seconds. The words unfolded like a tight string finally being released inside her. Each sentence carried something she had never received, not back then nor after. His truth, the pain, the shame, the love. She ran her fingers over the signature, felt the weight that Brandon had carried in silence, and for the first time understood that his silence hadn't been indifference, but fear. A fear she knew all too well. Brandon entered the room with the tea. He stopped when he saw her holding the letter. He stood still. Then, with a soft voice, he said, "You found it." Megan didn't respond immediately. Her eyes still glistened with trapped tears, but there was something different in them now. "Why didn't you give it to me?" she asked. Brandon sat slowly at the edge of the bed, his hands intertwined. "Because I thought it was too late, that you didn't want to hear it anymore, and deep down because rereading this made me feel weak." She stared at the paper once more. "You were wrong." He sighed deeply, but didn't defend himself, didn't ask for anything. He just stayed there, present, vulnerable. Megan pressed the letter to her chest for a moment, as if she needed to warm the words with her heart. "Was it real for you?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "All of that?" Brandon lifted his eyes. "You're the only thing that's always been real." A thick silence filled the room, but this time it wasn't the silence of pain. It was the silence of understanding, the kind where no explanations are needed, just presence. Megan rested her head on the pillow and closed her eyes, but her hand, in a nearly unconscious gesture, slid to his. She intertwined her fingers slowly. No words, and Brandon understood. She hadn't forgiven everything, but she had started. It started with a cramp, then another. At first, Megan thought it was just another wave of discomfort. She was only 35 weeks along. There had been no signs, no warnings. But as the rain intensified outside the apartment and the contractions began to sharpen and repeat, she knew something was shifting. The storm outside mirrored the one building inside her body. Brandon found her curled on the edge of the bed, hand pressed to her belly, teeth clenched. His eyes widened. "Is it time?" Megan nodded, breathless. I think she's coming." He was already moving, bag by the door, coat around her shoulders, calling ahead to the hospital. The car ride through Manhattan was a blur of headlights cutting through rain, and Brandon gripping her hand with a calmness she didn't recognize in him, not because it wasn't real, but because it was new. "I'm right here," he whispered every time the pain surged. She cried once in the elevator, not from the contraction but from the sound of his voice. It anchored her. At the hospital, everything sped up. Nurses moved quickly, monitors beeped. The sky outside flashed with thunder. Megan could barely hear the doctors over the roar in her own chest. Brandon never left her side, not for a second. He counted her breaths. He wiped her forehead. He kissed her hand when she sobbed. "You can do this," he said over and over, like a sacred vow. "You already are." In between contractions, when she could barely speak, she looked at him, and in his eyes, she didn't see the man who had let her walk away. She saw the man who came back. When the final moment arrived, she screamed, not from fear but from every pain she had ever buried. And then it was quiet. A cry pierced the room, high, wild, sacred. And there she was, Stella Grace Ellis, red-faced, tiny fists curled, eyes closed like the universe was too bright for her just yet. Megan sobbed. Brandon froze, breath caught in his throat. Then he laughed, a choked, disbelieving sound, as the nurse handed her into Megan's arms. "She's perfect," Megan whispered, voice trembling. "Brandon, she's ours." He kissed Megan's forehead, then her temple, then the top of Stella's tiny head. "I've never seen anything more beautiful in my life," he said, eyes wet. "Both of you." Hours later, the storm had softened into a drizzle. Megan lay in the recovery bed, Stella asleep on her chest. Brandon sat beside her, shoes off, exhaustion in every line of his body. but joy too. A quiet joy. The kind that doesn't shout but settles. They said nothing for a long time, just watched her. The weight of their past felt lighter somehow, not gone, but no longer unbearable. Brandon reached out, brushed a strand of hair from Megan's cheek. "I didn't think I could love anything more than you," he said quietly. And then she arrived. Megan looked up at him, eyes steady. Then, without hesitation, she whispered, "Marry me." Brandon blinked. "What?" She smiled. "I want to ask this time." His heart thudded. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more sure of anything. I don't want to marry you because I'm pregnant, or because we share a name on a birth certificate. I want to marry you because you stayed, because you fought, because you changed, not just for me, but for you." She paused, eyes softening. "And because somewhere in the middle of all this, I fell in love with you again." Brandon didn't answer. He just kissed her, long and slow and full of everything they hadn't said. When he pulled back, his voice was a whisper against her lips. "Yes?" Megan laughed. "That's not very poetic." He kissed her again. "Then let me try again." He stood, took her hand, and knelt beside the bed, right in front of Stella. "I choose you, Megan Carter. Again. And I'll keep choosing you. Every morning, every storm, every mistake, every miracle, for the rest of my life." Tears slid down her cheeks. He kissed her fingers. Stella stirred, letting out a soft sigh. And in that tiny, quiet room in the maternity ward, with the rain tapping like applause on the window, Megan knew. This was no longer a second chance. This was their first real beginning. The terrace was lit with soft amber lights, strung between beams like stars brought closer. The skyline of Manhattan stretched wide in the background, a quiet witness to everything they had lost, and everything they had found again. Megan stepped through the glass doors, her heels clicking gently on the wood, a warm breeze brushing her cheeks. And then she saw it. The chairs, the menu board, the exact shade of dark green on the awnings, the cafe counter with mismatched mugs, even the small potted ficus by the window. It was Café Lambert, the little coffee shop at Stanford, where she had first spilled her latte on Brandon Ellis and rolled her eyes at his smirk. Her breath caught. Brandon stood behind the counter in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up just like he wore back then. His hair was slightly tousled, a hint of grey at the temples, and he looked better than he ever had. Not because of youth, but because of growth. In his arms, Stella, wearing a tiny dress that matched Megan's first date outfit, a silent detail only Brandon would remember. "You didn't," Megan whispered, stepping forward. "I did," he smiled. 1 year. To the day. Since she changed everything. He handed Stella to a nearby friend, wiped his hands with exaggerated flair and said, "Your usual, Miss Carter." Megan laughed, covering her mouth. "This is insane." "This is love," he corrected, stepping from behind the counter and taking her hand. "And long overdue." He guided her to a small round table near the edge of the terrace where a single envelope sat beneath a mug of tea. She picked it up. Inside, their divorce papers, signed, dated, real. Brandon looked at her, eyes steady. "We signed these thinking we'd lost everything, but we were wrong." Megan blinked away a tear. "We thought we were breaking. Turns out we were just softening." He nodded. "Exactly. And today, I want to do it right." She gasped as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. No crowd, no applause. Just them, and the skyline, and their daughter's quiet laughter behind them. Brandon knelt. Again. This time, not out of desperation, but of certainty. "Megan Carter, you were my beginning before I even understood what love was, and now you are my choice, my peace, my home. Will you marry me? Again?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." This time her voice didn't shake. This time her hands didn't tremble. They hugged, laughed, cried into each other. Then slowly, together, they walked to the edge of the terrace. Brandon handed her the divorce papers. "One last goodbye?" She nodded. And with Stella clapping in the background, they ripped the papers in half and let the pieces fly into the Manhattan wind. The city that had once broken them now carried their pain into the sky like confetti. They kissed, long, certain, familiar. This wasn't a beginning. It was a continuation, the kind that only comes after the storm has passed. And just as they pulled apart, Megan whispered into his ear, "Next time, I get to propose." Brandon smiled. "Deal." The rooftop was quiet now. The last of the guests had gone home. The lights along the railing glowed softly, casting golden halos across the terrace tiles. A breeze swept through the skyline, gentle and warm, carrying with it the muffled sound of the city that never sleeps. Megan sat on a cushioned bench, barefoot, her wedding heels discarded hours before. She wore a simple white dress, not designer, not extravagant, just soft cotton that moved with her breath. Her hair was undone, falling over her shoulders like it had the night Brandon first kissed her in college. Stella lay across both their laps, fast asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the night. Brandon pressed a kiss to his daughter's forehead and leaned back, arm resting behind Megan. "This is it," he said softly. "Everything I didn't know I needed." Megan smiled without turning. "Took you long enough. I like to think I arrived exactly when I was meant to." She let her head fall gently against his shoulder. They said nothing for a while, just breathed in sync, grounded in something far beyond the image of perfection they once chased. This was something real, something earned. Their journey hadn't followed the script. They had broken apart, lost one another, fallen into silence, resentment, fear. But somehow, through missteps and missed chances, they had returned. Not to the beginning, but to something better. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found our way back?" she asked. Brandon didn't answer immediately. He glanced up at the stars, the same ones that had hung over their worst nights, now blessing their best. "I think about it more than I care to admit." Megan reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. "I wouldn't be me without all the things we survived," she said. "The pain, the silence, the growth. I hated it while it was happening, but now I get it." He looked at her. "You think we had to fall apart? I think we had to grow up, separately and then together." Brandon nodded. "Maybe love isn't just the beginning of a story. Maybe it's the part that comes after. The part you have to build and choose and keep showing up for," she added. He smiled. "Every day." Megan looked down at Stella's sleeping face. Her tiny fingers clutched the edge of Brandon's shirt like a lifeline. "She's going to grow up knowing what love really looks like," Megan whispered. Brandon's eyes softened. "Not perfect, but real." "Exactly." They stood slowly, careful not to wake her. Brandon carried Stella to the daybed nearby, where a light blanket waited. Megan tucked her in, brushing a kiss across her temple. Then she returned to him, barefoot, glowing, at peace. He held out a hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "There never was," he said. "We made it up as we went." She laughed, the sound as easy as the wind. And there, beneath the stars on the rooftop of a city that had once watched them fall apart, Megan and Brandon danced. No choreography, no cameras, no perfection, just slow steps, bare feet, fingers wrapped gently, two hearts moving as one. Love, as they now knew it, was not a firework. It was a candle, soft, warm, needing tending. A choice, a rhythm. A vow that didn't end at "I do," but continued every time they reached for each other instead of turning away. Their story hadn't ended when the baby arrived, or when the divorce was shredded, or when the rings returned to their fingers. Their story kept going, in meals shared, in sick days soothed, in arguments softened by apologies, in sleepy Sunday mornings and whispered late-night promises no one else would ever hear. This was there forever, and it was real. As the night deepened, Megan rested her head against Brandon's chest. His heartbeat was steady, familiar, home. And before she drifted into that quiet, sacred space between waking and dreaming, she whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." Again and again. Brandon held her tighter, always. Above them, the stars blinked like soft applause, and below their daughter slept peacefully, cradled by a love that had been broken, tested, and rebuilt. Not perfect, but lasting. They didn't need extravagant promises or perfect endings. The love they chose to build was made of pauses, reconciliations, and a whispered yes after many I don't knows. In the end, Megan and Brandon discovered that home isn't a place you arrive at. It's someone who walks beside you when you decide to stop running. And sometimes a happy ending isn't a new beginning in another country, but the quiet peace of two hearts that finally chose to stay. And you, have you allowed yourself to love without needing to be saved? If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us, where are you listening to this message from? Your presence here makes all the difference and keeps stories like this alive.